This is the SmallmouthCrush podcast. If you're a hardcore angler, you've come to the right place. This is a weekly podcast that will interview some of the top smallmouth bass anglers in North America. Travis and his guest will discuss what it takes to consistently catch big smallmouth, and you'll get a glimpse inside the mind of a trophy smallmouth angler. And now, here's your host of the SmallmouthCrush podcast, Travis Manson.
Hello and welcome to the SmallmouthCrush podcast. My name is Travis Manson. Here we are again talking smallmouth bass with the top smallmouth bass anglers across the country. It's been an awesome experience. I hope you guys are really enjoying this podcast, as well as the viewers here on my YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush. A lot of great information, overwhelming at times. So many great anglers. But I'm going to say we have a treat tonight because arguably could be one of the best smallmouth bass anglers on the planet. And I'm super excited. Steve Clapper is going to be joining us shortly. And we're going to talk all about smallmouth fishing. And hopefully he's going to give us a couple tips that we can take to the water this season and help us put some more smallmouth in the boat. But before we head over to Steve, let's talk about the Reel Shot. Of course, the Reel Shot carries all the most wanted bass tackle that a Smallmouth Crush fan could ask for. You guys know it. Top brands: Megabass, Jackal, Z-Man, Shimano, Dirty Jig, St. Croix, rods. So much to choose from. Easy to shop website, same day shipping. Make sure we get all your bass tackle before your next big bass adventure or your next bass tournament. And if you head on over there and mention Smallmouth Crush 15, that's going to be the secret code. The promo code to get you 15% off your first order at thereelshot.com. So go over there and check it out. And let's bring on our next guest. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Man, this is great.
Great to be here.
This is going to be some really good information here, Steve. I got to ask you right off the bat, how many smallmouth have you caught in your life? I mean, can you just round up to the nearest 1,000? Can you do that?
No, I'm just going to say lots.
Lots.
When you come to the dock after a good day and the guys ask you, how many did you get? I just say lots.
Lots.
Hopefully say lots. We'll put it that way.
Man, you've been fishing tournaments for a very long time. You're very successful. There isn't too many people that have a track record like yourself out there. For folks that don't know, basically you dominate, and maybe you fished outside of that region, but Lake Erie really, I would say, is your home body of water. Steve, if you could just give us a quick little background or introduction about yourself, where you fished in the past and kind of where you're at today.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, I live in Port Clinton. I moved here a little over a year ago Thanksgiving. And I'm married to the most wonderful woman in the world because she's put up with me for 53 years. And the deal of us moving up here, she was she said, you drive back and forth too much. She says, I know you come home when you're tired and you can't hardly stay awake. And we started looking for a home, and we looked about a year and a half, and we run onto these, I call them toy houses. There's 6 of us in a line that face we're just across the street from the water, and there's 6 on the other side that face 163. We're just outside of Port Clinton, and they're my wife, she took a beating on this. We downsized the house and we upsized the garage. My garage is a giant. In fact, that's where my office is here. My motor home's in here. My boat's in here. And tubs of tackle that, I won't live long enough to use it all. But I just, when I moved, I had built a house back in Lima, which was 2 hours away. And I built it 47 years ago now. And boy, what you accumulate in 47 years is unbelievable. And I had a lot of sentimental things that I didn't want to let go of. And yeah, Lake Erie's been my my love, we'll say, and finally got to move here. I have fished out of here. I've fished all down the lake shore, really, all the way down to Buffalo, and I've fished the Canadian shore down to Erie Bay, Long Point. Well, really, the whole shore. Lake St. Clair, of course, tons of lakes in Michigan. I've fished tournaments on Champlain and around in the South. Pretty much, I was a construction superintendent, and they had a deal, your age, your year's service, you have 80 points, and I was fortunate to have the 81 points when I was 51 years old, and I left.
Wow. Yeah, you have some amazing fishing up there. Obviously, Lake Erie, when you think of smallmouth bass, you have to think of Lake Erie. It seems like there's so many great fishermen from that part of the country. There really is, as far as guys that really seem to dominate and understand smallmouth. When did you actually fish your first, I guess, tournament on Lake Erie?
On whether I can remember back that far. I suppose open tournaments, maybe back in the early 80s, just little open tournaments, but it went from there to BFLs, and there was a circuit that a lot of the older guys will know. Larry Williams, he fished bass, and he made the classic, I think, 5 or 6 times, and he finally left that, and he and I were partners, and we fished up here for about 3 years on different little circuits, and we had a blast. It was, in fact, he's hoping to come up this summer. We haven't fished together for several years, and this coming summer, we're looking forward to getting together.
So, Steve, as far as, obviously you fished in the early 80s. Is there any tournaments that are real, I guess, memorable in your mind that stick out, like whether it be a decent finish or a finish you didn't expect, or perhaps a win? Looking back on your career out there fishing in these tournaments, what would you say is the number one memory that you have when it comes to competing?
That's pretty easy to pick that one out, Travis. I won the FLW Open at that went out of the Michigan side over Detroit. That was the biggest tournament I had ever fished in. It was the first tour tournament that I'd fished in. I'd fished EverStarts for years, and but I was the good Lord was with me. I was on them unbelievable well. Was fortunate enough to win that, and that was the biggest tournament by far that I had ever won.
So that was out of the mouth of the Detroit River.
Right.
And you mentioned you were on some good fish. Did you have like a good practice? Did you know going into that event that you had a good shot at doing well? Did conditions line up? I know a lot of times, I'm sure you've been on some pretty massive waves in your life. Was there some issues like that, or was it just smooth sailing? It was the easiest tournament you ever fished and you won, or did you have to work at it?
Well, I had some really interesting things happen in that. I think it was the next to the last day of practice. I had an issue. I had a compressor go out. I have one of the best mechanics in the country down at Dixie Marine, Brian Wolfley. I called him and I said, man, my compressor's out. He said, bring her down. And he said, I'll be there at 4 a.m. And so it's, from where I was on the river, I'm going to say a good 4 hours down there. So I took off. I did stop at home for a couple hours sleep and then ran down, and he switched it right out, put me a new compressor. I was on my way, and I got back and ran. A nervous wreck after that right before the tournament's going to start. And I was on fishing in 2 places really well, but they were like 17, 18 miles apart. And you know what that's like on the big water. You're not usually able to correct if you got any wind, if you make a move like that. It just takes too much time. But anyway, I went back, put in about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, nervous, ran out, never throwed the trolling motor down or anything, went over the spots, dropped my bait, drop shotting. I would click the bail shut and they'd be tight. So I went to 3 different spots that was all in this same area. And it was the same way on all 3 spots. So, that kind of made my mind up of where I was going. And I was fortunate enough to, it lasted me 4 days. And when you talk about rough conditions, the 3rd day there was 7-footers. And in fact, they had it all videoed, and you could hardly stay in the boat, It was, but they still bit. So it was just, it was a blessing, that's for sure.
So 7-footers, that's a big deal. Obviously, that had to have at least thrown you for a little loop. I know you're probably, built to be in those big waves and you're used to it, but the fact that those fish stayed there for 4 days and you're able to come away with that win, it has to be an awesome feeling. Walk me through like that last day. Did you know you had a good bag? Did you have a good bag right away? And going back into weigh-in, what were your thoughts leading up to, the final day of this event?
Well, in those days, the third day, from the 3rd and 4th day, you use one of FLW's boats. And so I was in a boat that I wasn't familiar with. It was a smaller boat. At that time, I had a 522. I've had 522s for many years, but that was it had a short trolling motor shaft. So and believe it or not, I could hold once in a while. I'd lose that, especially after having a fish. But the last day, it was flat. I was fortunate. I had a cameraman that I had done a show with, Hank Parker, and I had met him. And in fact, after Hank left, he stayed and fished with me for a day up on St. Clair. And so it was really sweet having somebody that you knew, and he kind of kept me calm that last morning. We had a little issue with batteries on, set up with the microphones, and so we had to change them out, and it got a little nerve-wracking. And I can remember when we went underneath the bridge headed out for the lake, and he said, "Just take a deep breath, Steve, everything's good." He was right. I had there was a lot of, I say a lot, there was 12 to 15 boats that came where I was at, and I was fortunate. My son, he went over on the Canadian side, had a friend over there, and they came out and they was there and got to watch and photograph the whole thing. The last day was a little trying. I had not caught probably a fish under 3 3/4 in the 3 days that I fished. And that morning, the first 2 fish I caught were like 2.5 pounders. And I was like, wow, where did you guys come from, But as it went on, and I was catching those fish right then on a drop shot. They were still there after I had a limit, but they wouldn't bite my drop shot anymore. And I could see them on the graph. So I backed off, and there's a deal. I know lots of guys do it, but cracking a tube, and I had a 3/4 ounce head, and I would throw past the hump. And I told the cameraman, I said, they'll bite this. And I snapped that, and I'd snap it like 3 times real hard and then just kill it. And when I say snap, and a lot of guys snap overhead, I snap sideways. When I kill it, they just load up on it. That really got my best fish, and I called out those smaller ones. So yeah, I knew if somebody was going to beat me, they was going to have to really catch them that day. I think at the end of the second day, they zeroed us. So I think I had a 3-pound lead, if I'm not mistaken. But that's on. The guy catches a giant stringer, and that can go away real quick if you don't catch him. It was pretty. I felt pretty confident when I came back in, and it was, like I say, it was a highlight of my fishing career. That's for sure. My wife was there. My kids were there. My mom and dad was there. My mother-in-law. So we had a real party that night. It was it was unbelievable. For somebody that doesn't fish the big leagues all the time, to come away with that, I was very blessed.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that had to have been special, to have your family and everybody there, and you worked your whole life for that moment. I can only imagine. So you brought up a really good point. Of course, drop shotting, you're really comfortable with. This cracking of the tube is a technique that's really, it seems like a lot of people, a lot of anglers from Lake Erie region utilize that technique more than anywhere else in the country. And it has to be effective. Obviously, it helped you win that event. Are those two techniques that you pretty much are standard for anglers that are looking to fish Lake Erie?
Well, there's a number of them that do it, but when it gets flat, you're around them. You've got to do something to trigger them. And being in that, this was in water that was come up to 22, 23 out of 26. So you got to have a bait with some weight to make them trigger. A jerk bait, in shallower is a big trigger bait, but I don't have. Although I've come across a few little things that I've learned since then. That's been several years ago that I won that. I do some stroking of baits also. I guess like the old Kentucky lake fishing, sometimes you can trigger them that way also.
Can you elaborate a little bit more when it comes to what you're talking about as far as, stroking some baits? What type of baits in particular are you looking at when you do that application?
Well, I had a buddy call me tonight. He said, "Now don't give everything up, Steve." No, there's a couple of jig baits type baits that I really like to stroke, and it's not something I do all the time. But when you're looking to trigger a fish, and you're around them, and they don't want to drop shot, they don't want to tube fish slow. I'm always looking for something that you can agitate them into biting.
That really intrigues me. Calm conditions, does that seem to be when you're going to utilize these techniques more than not?
Yeah, I would say more so. But this fall, I caught a lot of fish stroking the bait. Also, it can be my main thing. I like in the spring and the fall, and some in the summer. I love to throw a swim bait. In the fall, that is my favorite way to catch them. It's just something that there's several of us that fish real late in the year. In fact, we fish, into December. And in fact, we thought about going one day, and I didn't, but my friend did, and he couldn't raise it. But that was in January, and the water, it was only 34. We had caught him really well when it was 38, but he wasn't able to get bit.
Do you think you would have been able to if you were out there?
He knew the spots because he was with me the last time I had been out there, and and he's just a real good friend. His name's Mike Burke, and I met him years ago at a seminar I was doing over in Ashland, Ohio, and he come up and introduced himself, and he only lived 30 miles north of me. I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Findlay." I said, "Well, what are you doing over here?" He said, "I come to listen to you." And I said, "Wow." And we've been friends ever since, and it's just one of them relationships that you know, the people you meet fishing are some of the best people in the world. And I've been fortunate enough to fish with some of the best in the world. I fished with Nixon, Tommy Martin, Hank Parker, and loads of guys from right around here. Well, just like Jared Rhodey, you had with him. He's probably the best drop shot fisherman that I've ever been in the boat with. He's spent unbelievable time on the water, and it really shows. He's really good. Probably best in the Western Basin. Him and Mike Trombley.
Jared Rhodey was on, and he is a fantastic angler. If you guys haven't checked out that podcast, that was season 1, episode 4 is when we talked with him, and he loved drop shot, and he talked a bit about it. Steve, I want to know what do you think your strengths are when it comes to smallmouth fishing? Throughout the years, why did you dominate so much in these events and tournaments?
Well, I have to say, as time on the water is, and I'm sure most guys can testify to that. I fished before there was GPS. In fact, I started with, of course, a compass, and then I got on Loran. And my first time, you'll like this because I know you up to the St. Lawrence. My first trip out was out of Kingston. This Loran was my first trip, and when you get out there, you can't see the shore, and I'm hoping that's Loran. In fact, my wife, she kind of, while I was practicing, she was delving into how you use that, and she was getting me set up, So, but it's kind of a scary thing when you're not sure of a piece, and I guess through the years, I started with a GPS, and I put one on the front, which I know Zona thought was crazy at first, but he saw that it wasn't. And everybody has them up front and on the console. But to say why I did, I guess it's just the love for it and the time I spent. I just had that desire, it was 2 hours. It's 2 hours to come up here to the Port Clinton side, and it was 2 hours to go to like Elizabeth Park over at the mouth of the river. So, I let the wind depict where I was going, and a lot of tournaments, went out of Elizabeth Park. I fished them up on St. Clair too. I like fishing St. Clair. It's not my cup of tea. I like it when you get on them. I don't really like hunting them out there though, because of the lack of structure. Lake Erie just meets my cup of tea, you might say. The structure. I love, there's a lot of, we'll call it drifting and draggers, and I'm sure everybody knows Joe Baylog. Joe Baylog and I fished tournaments together for several years, and Joe's the same way as me. If you ever seen me with a drift sack out, you knew I was in trouble. I wasn't catching, and I haven't had a drift sock out in years. But not that I haven't been in trouble. before, but I don't like dragging around, and I love it when the sun's shining. That puts them on the structure. If it's cloudy, a lot of times they'll wander, and that's where them draggers would beat your eyes out.
I mean, that's really good information. I've used the drift sock a few times. In fact, the first couple times I fished Erie, that's what I thought everybody was doing. So you had to have a drift sock if you're going to Lake Erie. I want to know, Steve, in the past 80s, 90s, fishing these tournaments, are you still able to get on, like today? Are you able to go on Lake Erie and catch fish where you've caught fish 30 plus years ago, or how has that changed?
Well, you know, we talk about that a lot. There's a lot of areas that they don't seem to use anymore, and one area I won several tournaments on it. You know, BFLs and opens, and I would run there for a jackpot tournament. You know, and it was a long run, but the last several years, I always got to go check it. You know, and it's out of the way, but they just don't seem to use it anymore, and it's one of the best structures on the lake. It just befuddles me. You know, there's some that just keep holding up, but you know, not near as many as what used to be. Well, we'll say a summertime tournament. You pray that the weather is fit that you can move around a bunch, because you may be fishing for 5 or 6 bites, and you know, and you only got to catch 5, but you know, you definitely are at what should I say, a great advantage if you can move around. It takes so long in such rough water. I got the biggest bass boat they make. I've got a 522D. I've got what I feel is the best outboards made, Mercury. I've been with Mercury for years, and I keep my equipment in top-notch shape, and that you just have to do that up here. But you know, you have to use your head and not go too fast. And I've seen guys that you know, blow by in the start of a tournament, and you got 4-foot waves, and when they get there, their depth finder's going, or their trolling motor's broke, or it just doesn't pay off. You need to take your time. That's always been high on my list.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I can't stress enough the fact that you might have some big fish way, way offshore, 15, 20, 25 miles, sometimes even more. And if you're not taking your time to get there, what's good is your trolling motor when it's hanging in the water. I've been there. I think it just comes with experience. You realize I'm going to get there eventually. It might take me an extra half hour, but I don't mind cruising at 15 miles an hour with the bow straight up in the air. I'm going to get there. And that's kind of how you approach things. So I want to talk about techniques. You know, over the years, how has that changed? Or, you know, has drop shotting been something you've always implemented, or in recent years is that? I just want to ask, like, even Ned rigging. I mean, do you tend to try to keep up to current things that are going on? And when you're out there, are you looking for new stuff all the time, or you know, what do you do when you have so much history and knowledge? Like, what goes through your head when you're out there?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't get to graph around as much as I like to anymore. My wife will not let me go by myself anymore, which, you know, I'll soon be 73. And she said she didn't move up here to live alone. So I don't go without somebody with me. And, you know, when you got somebody with you, they want to catch them, you know.
Don't they? Yes.
And I don't have that time to idle around. Now I've got a good friend that lives right next to me, and we met each other when I moved up here, and I mean, we're right next to one another, and he has a 521 walleye boat. I think it's 621, aren't they? Whatever, the big walleye boat, Ranger walleye boat. if we go walleye fishing, we go in his boat. Rick Browning's his name. Very, very good fisherman. And if we go bass fishing, we go in mine. Now he'll stand for some idling around and looking. That's how you find them good spots. And I always used to tell him it seemed like every third year I would get a spot. I'd find a spot that I could win on. They're harder and harder and harder to come by. I haven't found one of those. Well, I take that back. I did fish a little jackpot tournament with Jared Rohde, and we was on a spot that we had never fished in a tournament on, and we were lucky. We bagged them really good late in the day because there was somebody else on it when we got there. So we come back late, and they bit for us, and we blew it away. It was just one of them fortunate things. But yeah, it's been a long time since I found one that I could really, really count on. And I don't fish that many tournaments anymore. I've slowed down in that aspect too.
Steve, you brought up a really good point, and I hope the listeners caught that. I certainly did, because I feel the same way. Your goal, what Steve just said, was his goal is every 3 years to find a magical spot. And that is so true. I fish Lake Ontario quite a bit in that zone, and it's my goal every year. I spend so many hours out there daily. I'm out there every day. And it's my goal to find one new spot a year that's like magical. And some years it doesn't happen, but some years it does. That's such a good point. That's what I think people's mindset should be. You're not going out there and going to idle around for 6 hours and find the magic spot. It's not like that. I mean, it's hours and hours upon graphing. And when you got a partner, like you're saying, they want to go catch fish, it can be frustrating. So that's really important. Walk me through electronics for you. I mean, you've seen them all, right? From flashers to I don't know, paper graphs. I don't know. And then to today's electronics.
Well, I didn't have a paper graph, but I had flashers, and I even put a flasher on after I had mapping system, and 2D sonars. I liked if I fished around grass, and I still love to go largemouth fishing too. There was about a 5 or 6 year stint. I would spend a couple weeks in March down to Falcon Lake. Boy, back in the heyday of that was unbelievable. But back to the depth finders, my wife about had a fit. I got a 16 HDS Live 16 on the console, and I had a 12 on the front. I never did go into buying a Panoptix. I got wind of Lowrance coming out with a good transducer, and so I got this thing. I sold my 12, and I bought another 16 to put up front, and I plan on using, splitting those screens up and using that 16 for the look ahead. Yeah, I try to stay on top of that. I know one of my great friends, Mike Trombley, a really good fisherman. He put it on his boat. I mean, we fished together one day, and he would throw off of the structure or something. He said, "Now, see, I caught that one, and I never would have known it was there if I hadn't seen it." So, where's this going to stop at, though? I want to get the transducer, and I haven't got that yet. I'm looking forward to using it. It'd just be another tool. I know I have friends that walleye fishing here is off the wall. I mean, it's phenomenal. And I love to vertical jig them. And we do some trolling. I'm not wild about that, but it puts that meat in the freezer. I will say that. But there's a friend of mine that runs a prop shop, and he's talked to a fellow that's been vertical jigging them out in 40-some feet of water and catching them like 20 feet deep, and he's looking at them with a live scope, and he said it's unbelievable. I watch him eat it. Well, that's pretty intriguing, to see them in that deep of water and see them suspended up, and because them suspended fish, as far as bass now, they're a hard sucker to catch, in my estimation.
Yeah, I agree. That I think you'll be really pleased with the sonar today. 2D is what I grew up or doing and fishing. It definitely suited my needs. But now after using forward and live scope, it really changes the way you can fish and approach these fish, especially like you're saying, those suspended fish that you might not always see on those graphs. Wow, we're 40 some minutes now into this podcast. Time flies when you're talking fishing. Steve, I want to make sure we get to a couple more of these questions. I mean, I know we could talk for hours. There's so much knowledge that you have when it comes to smallmouth fishing. But I want to know, if you could only use one bait for, let's say, next year to catch smallmouth, I'm only going to give you one bait. What are you picking up?
That's a tough one. I suppose I would have to say a tube, although a swim bait would it would be hard between the two, But day in and day out through the season, that's when the water hits 40 degrees, I start catching them on a tube. The tube, it seems to die off to me in the summertime. I mean, you can catch them on it, but I feel like I can catch them a lot better on a swim bait after that 40 degree. Once it gets to like the 45 or so, that swim bait takes over, and I'll still have a tube on the deck, but it won't be what I'm looking to. Man, when it comes back in the fall and you've been on the drop shot for months, and all of a sudden that tube will kick butt. I guess I would have to say, and if I could only do one, it'd be a tube.
Yeah, I can't argue. I mean, Steve, that's a good choice. Obviously, tubes put a lot of fish in the boat. I want to circle back. You mentioned now twice in this interview talking about swim baits, and I haven't been able to drill you on that yet. So specifically, can you walk us through, if you can give up the swim bait you prefer, perhaps the size, the colors, and then are you throwing these deep or shallow fish, or how are you working a swim bait? What's your favorite way to work a swim bait to catch fish?
Well, when the water's real cold, I like a swim bait that doesn't have a lot of kick. That's really pretty tight. Once it warms up some, I'm stuck on Kitex, and I'll fish them all depths. There'll still be some fish in different areas that you can catch through the summer, but once fall comes around, that's my bread and butter. I mean, I love to do that. I know I've got friends that really like to throw blade baits, and blade baits catch them. But why, if I can catch them on a single hook bait and have that bite, I tell, well, like Jared Rhodey is a fantastic blade bait fisherman. And that's good, but when you're catching them one after another, it takes too long to get them trebles out, and you can ruin your day with the wrong flop. And it's a lot easier to pop that swim bait out of there and right back in the water. And I just love the bite on a swim bait. And I like to fish them deep. Deep, shallow. I like to throw them in all. That's got to be my favorite thing in the fall, especially.
Are you using a football head, just a standard head, and your retrieve? Is it more of a drag on the bottom, swimming, a variety of things?
Yeah, I like to grind them in the bottom in deep water. using a heavy swim bait. I've used a lot of different heads, and a lot of people think you're crazy, but you grind it in there. It's an unbelievable bite. I mean, we caught so many this fall. It was phenomenal. I mean, you can have 100+ fish days, with a couple, 3 in the boat. And a lot of times when it's real cold. In fact, I had one fellow fell out this year. He ended the day pretty quick, but luckily it was almost the end of the day. But I wear a life preserver all the time. I'm not as stable as I used to be. I don't have sea legs like I used to have. And I put it on in the morning and I don't take it off. And I don't realize it's there. It's, just one of the blow up ones. I don't mind it at all. I like to reinforce that on everybody that goes with me, and that was the only one that fell out, and he didn't have one on. There was 2 of us though, got him back in the boat, but it was very cold. He laid down on the floor, and we took off, for the bank, and we had quite a little jaunt to go. So it was everything was good. He got in, but he told me, he said, I'm gonna have one of those, and he said, I'm gonna wear it. That's a good thing to do, especially.
Well, this is some really good information, man. I could, again, talk to you forever about smallmouth fishing. There's so much knowledge in your head that we didn't even scrape. And I hope the viewers and listeners of this podcast enjoyed it. I know I have. What are your future plans? I mean, are you still going to fish some team events or maybe some big events in the future? Do you have that drive?
Well, I used to run around and fish, the Northern Opens and that, and then go to Champlain and down to Buffalo when they went down there. But there's not any sizable tournaments that I've seen that's scheduled for here. I might jump in a BFL or something like that. But I'll tell you, I've really enjoyed taking people that have never got to do it and to see their eyes, and they've never caught a fish like that. And my big desire this spring is I sold my last boat to a fellow that lived in Kentucky. He had black lung, had worked in the coal mines, younger than me, but he just went downhill, and he applied to get new lungs, and he went to Vanderbilt and had 2 new lungs put in. And I prayed for him, and he's a great guy, and he wanted me to send pictures all the time. So I've sent him pictures of our days on the water, and I promised him, I said, if you get well enough, I'm going to take you this spring. That is what I'm looking forward to more than anything.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and just had never caught fish like that. And I hope that I'm able to put him on them,
Right. Hopefully you have that opportunity. How about some of the companies that supported you through your career, Steve?
I've been with Mercury Forever and Ranger, Loomis rods, Shimano reels. Back in the day, I drop shot with a couple of Loomis drop shot rods, and I've got, I'd hate to say how many casting rods and such. When years ago, I was on the Loomis Pro staff, and I've got away from buying all that new stuff all the time. I got lots of boat rash on my reels. I had to get a couple of rods last winter rewrapped, and I've got a great friend that did it, made them look like they were brand new. I was amazed at how you could do that after something was beat to shreds, and I had used braided line to fix a guide, and a super glue. That's how I fix them. They don't look very good, but he was kind of dumbfounded when I took them to him. He said, "Man, these are beat to shreds." He said, "Well, see what you can do with them," and he made them like new. So I've been using Lowrance for years and years, and I've had great luck with them. Really looking forward to putting this look ahead on there. You know, it'll be something else. My buddies that's using Panoptic say it put a whole different thing in my life. He said, "Man, I can't wait to go." You know, he said it's so yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I guess that's about all. I mean, I've had different sponsors through the years, but Ranger and Mercury were the two main ones, and they've the Mercury motors have been phenomenal for me. I'm running a 250 Verado. You know, it's kind of hard to tell they're running. I've jumped up on the deck many times, and guys have said, "Are you going to shut it off?" They would hear the water running. You know, they didn't hear the motor running. But yeah, I've been blessed with good equipment.
Yeah, no doubt. You have to have good equipment. You have to have good companies, products that you believe in, especially when you're dealing with those big water, big smallmouth like you have all those years out on Lake Erie, and there's no doubt you still dominate out there. It's been a pleasure, Steve, talking with you. I just want to thank you again for coming on with us for a short hour talking smallmouth.
Well, yeah, and I was it's a humbling experience for me that you thought enough of me to be on your show. I really appreciate it. It's another highlight in an old man's life.
Well, you deserve it, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, viewers and listeners. And as always, until next time, we'll see you guys on the water.
Thanks so much for listening today. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show and follow us on Instagram at SmallmouthCrush. Also, the YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating and comment with a review below. And as always, until next time, we'll see you on the water.